Here are the 20 best werewolf movies according to Yardbarker. Along with the vampires and Frankenstein's monster, the werewolf has remained one of the most recognizable monsters in the movies. Late phases. Some werewolf movies lean too much into the horror aspect, but Late Phases manages to be disturbing while having a genuine human heart. At the film's center is the fraught relationship between father and son, Ambrose and Will McKinley, the later of whom moves the former into a nursing home. However, it becomes clear that werewolves are hunting the residents very quickly. Silver Bullet. Stephen King has been one of the most prolific horror writers of the 20th and 21st centuries, and in the novella Cycle of the Werewolf, he turned his attention to the lycanthrope. In this case, he uses the figure of the werewolf to examine questions of religious faith, since the creature is none other than a preacher who comes to believe that his murderous and beastly alter ego entitles him to enact God's will. When Animals Dream. When Animals Dream focuses on a teenage woman who becomes a werewolf. It would probably be going too far to say that the film is subtle, but this is precisely what makes such a compelling watch. Sometimes all one needs is to watch a film in which a young woman's transition into adulthood is also a metamorphosis into a monstrosity. Werewolves Within. Werewolves Within is one of the relatively few werewolf movies that leans more into comedy and mystery rather than horror and tragedy. It's a perfect sort of whodunit, focusing as it does on a snowbound group of folks, one of whom might be a werewolf. The Curse of the Werewolf. For quite a while, no one did a horror film quite like the British studio Hammer Film Productions. In The Curse of the Werewolf, they delivered a film that is part gothic tragedy and part horror film, focusing as it does on a young man whose life is cursed by the circumstances of his birth and who becomes a murderous werewolf. Wolfen. 1981 was something of a banner year for werewolf films, and one of the high-profile releases on the subject was Wolfen. Though there's no shortage of thrills and lupine slangs in this film, it's also one of the more thoughtful entries in the genre. Ginger Snaps. The figure of the werewolf, like so many other monsters, consistently proves to be a remarkably flexible allegory. In the film Ginger Snaps, it's meant to stand for a young woman's journey toward puberty and adulthood. Dog Soldiers. While there is plenty of human drama in Dog Soldiers, the real heart of the story rests on the shoulders of Kevin McKidd's Private Cooper and Sean Pertwee's Sergeant Henry G. Wells, who are both part of a group of soldiers struggling to survive in the Scottish Highlands against an onslaught of werewolves. Underworld: Rise of the Lycans. The original Underworld gave rise to an unexpected franchise, and in Underworld: Rise of the Lycans, viewers at last get to see the origins of the long-standing war between the vampires and the Lycans. Trick or Treat. Trick or Treat is a fun take on the horror film comprised of 4 loosely connected segments. The last one is a true treat for werewolf fans, focusing on a group of young women who lure young men to their doom. The young Laurie, played by Anna Paquin, is central to this story. Their transformation scene is particularly disturbing in all of the best ways. Wolf. Wolf is equal parts romantic drama and horror. Wolf stars Jack Nicholson as Will Randall, a man bitten by a wolf, and subsequently begins to turn into a wolf himself. Directed by respected director Mike Nichols and featuring a committed performance from Nicholson, it avoids some excesses and silliness that often accompany the werewolf film genre. Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf. Throughout his long history, Scooby-Doo has contended with all manners of monsters. While most of these have proven to be humans in disguise, in Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf, it turns out that Shaggy is the one fated to become a beast. The Wolfman. No list of great werewolf movies would be complete without The Wolfman, one of the most beloved and enduringly popular of the Universal Monster series of movies. In this case, the unfortunate werewolf is Larry Talbot, who becomes the ravenous beast through no fault of his own. I Was a Teenage Werewolf. People tend to forget that the 1950s was a very angst-ridden decade, and many of the teen films of the period articulated the stresses and strains of being a teen. I Was a Teenage Werewolf, true to its title, focuses on the tragic story of Michael Landon's Tony Rivers, a young man who becomes a werewolf thanks to a serum. Teen Wolf. Michael J. Fox is at his charming best in Teen Wolf, which, as the title suggests, focuses on an unfortunate high school student who also happens to be a werewolf. It manages to straddle the line between coming-of-age comedy and horror. Werewolf by Night. Gael Garcia Bernal gives one of his usual strong performances in Werewolf by Night, part of the ever-growing Marvel Cinematic Universe. He portrays the character of Jack Russell, a man who is not only a monster hunter, but also a werewolf. The Wolfman. If there's one thing that Hollywood loves almost as much as a horror movie, it's a remake of a classic horror movie. In 2010, audiences got to see one such reimagining in the form of The Wolfman. The film largely follows the same story beats as its predecessor, focusing on Lawrence Talbot, his return to England, and his subsequent transformation. The Company of Wolves. Angela Carter wrote the screenplay for this haunting and surreal werewolf film based on her short story of the same name, drawing on the fairy tales and folklores of Europe. The Howling. The 1980s was when the horror film flourished, and it managed to produce several notable werewolf features. Though somewhat overshadowed by An American Werewolf in London, there are still many reasons to enjoy this film, including the special effects. An American Werewolf in London. John Landis, An American Werewolf in London, managed to be peak 1980s horror cinema, yet timeless. When two young Americans go backpacking on the English moors, things quickly turn ugly when a werewolf attacks them. Though David survives, he is transformed into a werewolf.
Row 18, plot 20.